There's our poll. All right, we're just going to give a sec for other people to join. I've just put up a poll. Please take a minute. 3 quick questions. Give us a little bit of a sense of where you're at in SharePoint land before we dive in and get going here. Okay, so while folks are answering the polls, joining the poll questions and joining us here, I'm excited to introduce our topic today, Supercharge your SharePoint adoption to save hours of time. We've had a crazy high response to this topic. We had over 100 people register for this webinar. So I think every time we do a SharePoint webinar, there's tons of interest. And I think it's because a lot of people are using SharePoint, a lot of people are interested in it. So we will get right into it. I'm excited for the first time to be running a webinar with Mr. Luke Bartley. Luke, welcome.
Pleasure to meet everyone. Thank you for having me.
Luke, for those that don't know, Luke is our manager of our professional services team. And Luke is joining this webinar today because he is he's our resident SharePoint guru. He is a fantastic source of knowledge for our whole team on everything SharePoint. And on a regular basis, he implements all sorts of different SharePoint projects for our clients. He also does a bunch of training for clients on SharePoint, how to use it, how to adopt it. So obviously, it just made sense for us to bring somebody, and he's the technical brain and knows way more about SharePoint than me. So I'm excited to have him as part of this webinar. So here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to probably have about half an hour or so of content. We're going to go through 6 different ways that we think people can jump ahead on the SharePoint side. We are making some assumptions about your SharePoint knowledge. If we've jumped ahead a little bit too quick, please ask questions in the Q&A panel. Just drop in questions, comments. I need to know more about this. Can you dive more into this area? All that sort of stuff. We're fine to do a little bit of a choose your own adventure. The way that we do these webinars is we try and have half an hour of kind of packed together content. I think we've all been on webinars that are half an hour webinars that somebody stretches into an hour, and it's no fun. And we also want to leave lots of opportunity at the end for questions. So as I said, put your questions in the Q&A panel. We'll either address them as we kind of go along, or we'll come back to them at the end. So, and one more thing, quick plug. Our next webinar, Microsoft Copilot. I'm so excited about this subject. Everybody thinks I'm like a Copilot, I don't know, spokesperson or something. But we've been waiting for so long for Copilot to come out. Copilot is out. It's in use. We're seeing all sorts of amazing use cases for it. So if you're interested in learning more about Copilot, how to use it, demoing, like we're going to do a bunch of demos of different ways that you can use Copilot to save hours and hours of time. I'll even talk about how I did something that usually takes me 4 hours in less than an hour on Friday morning in this webinar. So it'd be a great webinar, great bunch of stuff that we'll be talking about Copilot-wise. So please, you can do the QR code or go to techify.ca. Under training, you'll find the registration for our webinars, or if you're on our mailing list, you might get an email or 2 suggesting that you register. Okay, so here's what we had for the poll, Luke. We have about 36% of folks that are on here frequently struggle to find stuff in SharePoint. 44% occasionally struggle to find stuff in SharePoint. And so 21% are rarely or never. The confidence level and the security of files and permissions, 43% are about a 3, 26% are a 4, and 12% are a 5. So we can do a little bit on the security front, I think. And excuse me, of the folks on this webinar, only 18% have access through their phone to SharePoint, or 18% know they have access to their phone. 38% are unsure, and 45% say no.
We're going to close that gap.
Yeah. Okay. So good. So that gives us kind of a good basis of knowledge. I think we're kind of on point, and I'm just going to end the poll. I think we're on point in what we're focusing on today. And we can get going. There's already been a comment, Copilot, yay. Awesome. You are my people. Thank you. Thank you, Paulo. That's awesome. All right, let's get going to the meat of SharePoint. So here's the deal: SharePoint's being used all over the place. It's more than 250,000 organizations are using SharePoint, according to Microsoft, including over 85% of Fortune 500 organizations as part of their Microsoft 365. And I got to tell you, it's rare that we go into a business that isn't either already using SharePoint in some way or another, or thinking about it, right? I've got a file server. Why do I have a file server? All my friends are in SharePoint. Or do we really need to have these boxes in the office that we replace every 4 or 5 years and spend $15,000, $20,000 or more replacing physical boxes? Can we go cloud-based and all that sort of stuff? Here's another bit of why. So the average, I'm going to give you two stats. One is average employee, according to one study, spends 3.6 hours daily searching for information. So Luke, we pay people like half of their time, apparently. We pay them just to search for stuff.
Apparently, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, so that sucks. And so we want to get rid of that or dramatically reduce that. The other stat that we've used for years is it's a couple hours a week that SharePoint can save in terms of productivity time by doing the different things that we're going to go through today. In addition to being able to find documents quickly, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do to save time. And like the most common estimate's a couple hours a week, but it could be 4 or 5, 6 hours a week quite easily. So, Luke, are you ready to kind of get into it?
I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to fire everyone up with some good information about SharePoint.
All right. So just as a sort of primer, when we were working on this presentation deck together, we were emailing it back and forth as an attachment, right? And there were 17 different versions of it, and we got confused of what version, and our email boxes got kind of clogged up and stuff like that. Is that right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
No.
So, I know that was a bit of a pain point. So with that kind of prequel, what we want to learn, or what we really want to demo, is collaboration. One of the biggest points of SharePoint. As Brendan just said, you work on something, you send it via email, someone receives it, you work on it, you send it back. It's almost like traditional mail. It's like sending something in through snail mail and you waiting on your response to get back. Well, when your information and documents live within SharePoint, it's brilliant. Now you have something called real-time collaboration. So what we've done is we've done a little mock-up screen here of what collaboration looks like, just on a very basic document. This is an Excel document. This is proprietary to kind of just what we're working in here, and this is what you're going to see. So there's a couple key features we want to point out. In the top left-hand corner, you can see the autosave. Autosave is turned on automatically while you're working on a document. So the days of, oh, my computer crashed, or there was a power outage, or I've lost my information, that's gone. You're being saved in real time. So you never have to try and worry about recovering information. The collaboration piece is where it comes into play. In the very top right-hand corner, you can see my name, Luke Bartley. I was the first one to open up the document, but then there was someone else that decided to come in on the document, which is the Techify administrator. There is no limit to how many people can collaborate on a single document. In this instance, we have 2. You could have 3, 4, 5, depending on the size of your team, collaborating in real time on a single document. The key pieces here is if you look at the highlighted cells that we've got, which in this case is E8 and G6, you can see that the Techify administrator and myself in real time are in 2 different cells inputting information in. And as I type on that keyboard, the Techify administrator would see me typing and it would pop up automatically on the screen. It just boasts the ability to work on a document in real time. No more snail mail back and forth. It's a brilliant way to collaborate.
Yeah, we still end up going into businesses where people are emailing back and forth documents. They're confused about what versions. Our kind of lame joke, or my lame joke, about the PowerPoint presentation, as we were working on this, we were working on it in real time. There were three of us, between Luke and I and Arem, who's our marketing person. We're all making changes and adjustments, and there's no emailing back and forth. And there's occasional Teams message here and there, but we all have the link, we all have access to it, and we're making changes on an ongoing basis. So we've just fixed, by the way, we just fixed the webinar link for the Copilot webinar. Somebody had pointed out that there was an issue with the link. So that's the speed of our team just moves in quick time. So as we were working on that PowerPoint presentation, as I said, it's so much faster when you can just kind of throw in different changes and edits and stuff like that. And that kind of gets us to our next point. So you start with that real-time collaboration. You're able to work on the same Excel, Word, PowerPoint document at the same time, which has just become sort of table stakes and normal to us. And then part of how you need to, like, we feel strongly, you need to supercharge your adoption of SharePoint is make sure people are emailing links, emailing, Teams messaging, sharing links. Because if you don't create a culture and a workflow around of sharing links, not attachments, you will break all of SharePoint. This is the foundation of SharePoint. Once you attach a file, you eliminate the security of it. You eliminate the collaboration, you eliminate the versions, you eliminate basically the capability to do all the stuff that we're going to talk about today. So when we first, many years ago, started working with SharePoint, we had to create a culture where if somebody emailed an attachment, we would just reject it. We'd just say, I'm not looking at this document. You send me a link, do not send me an attachment, do not fill up my inbox, do not make me less productive because you're used to emailing attachments. So it's so critical, and it gives you that ability to have the security and have the control of the access and that sort of stuff when you are sending links. And as I said, you can send links through your email from right within the document. So you see the top right corner of the slide where it says share, or you can go file, share, and then you can pick who to share it to, and you can copy the link, or you can send it right from there. You can copy it, put it into Teams, or do it that way. All right, awesome. So we're not sending it. I just have to do that every time we talk about SharePoint. I just need to talk about sending links and not attachments, because we've had too many SharePoint implementations where people keep emailing attachments. It drives me nuts. It just breaks it all. Okay, Luke, let's talk about version control.
Absolutely. So version control, frame a little scenario for you. Think of you're opening up a document, you're working it in real time, part of this new collaboration because you've adopted SharePoint. And let's say John and Sally are working on the same thing. Sally decides to go for a coffee, leaves for lunch, closes her computer, and John is still working on the document. He saves the changes, and Sally comes back a couple hours later and says, "Uh-oh, John, you deleted all my changes. Where's my information? I need it." Version control. One of the brilliant things about SharePoint, and I want to make this very, very clear, is the days of having to call IT and say, "Hey, I need this document," was actually overwritten. IT says, "No problem, we'll get it for you." A day, 2 days, sometimes a week to do a restore. Guess what? SharePoint, instant. You've got it in less than 30 seconds. Version control is a brilliant feature built in that allows you to instantly either view or restore a document up to 50 iterations. Yes, 50 iterations. So if you've opened and saved, if another person's opened and saved, 50 iterations are instantly available at your fingertips to either view and restore right through SharePoint. We do have a little demo video here that I'll get Brennan to click through, and then I'll kind of just guide you through. So what you're seeing here is a basic SharePoint that is set up. What we're doing is we're drilling down to the actual space to find the document. So in this case, we're going to look at the hot tech takes document here. 3 little dots is like a right click, and then you've got something called version control. And as you can see, there's 3 different edits that have been made here. So you can see the time index, exactly who it was, and you have a couple of options. You can either view or restore instantly right within SharePoint, right on the spot. You don't have to restore it, you can view it. So you can actually have the real-time document and the version that it was at said time index on screen to do a comparison, and then you can decide to restore. Brilliant feature built into SharePoint. You will never lose your data again.
Yeah, we've had some SharePoint implementations where the client says, okay, well, you can't turn on this like multiple people working on the same document at the same time, because then it'll just create chaos and everything will be changed randomly all over the place. And it doesn't create chaos because you have this backstop, this version control backstop. You also have within each document, you can go in and look at the changes that were made by different people. And you can see the adjustments and changes, and it's tracked, and that's tracked better than it's tracked in a conventional document. So it's easier, it's more simple to see the changes, the adjustments. You can even click retroactively track changes. So if you're working on a Word document and somebody's made a bunch of changes and you're like, all right, show me who's made what changes, you click a button and it shows within the document as if you had track changes on all the time. It's really neat, really saves a boatload of time. So that's great. Let's see, what do we have next? Oh yeah, we can access SharePoint anywhere, anytime. So some little known facts about SharePoint, maybe some widely known, depending on your experience. So you can access SharePoint, like when your documents are in SharePoint, you can do the conventional, I'm in Microsoft Word, go file, open, or file, save as, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. So you can do that. For those that are used to Windows Explorer, now called File Explorer, you can do the same thing in File Explorer, where you just go, if you were used to having your S drive or your T drive or whatever, and it was showing up there, you can do the same thing in SharePoint. So the adoption and the change for your staff isn't as dramatic. It's like, well, wait, I used to do everything in File Explorer. You've taken that all away from me. No, you can still have it there. And then of course you can access it web-based. And the web-based access is where you have some more of that advanced features. The next point we're going to talk about search a little bit, but that restoring, or how to restore, and the version control and stuff like that. Now, the other piece, which is really important to know, is you can also access it on your mobile phone. And you can be literally anywhere with an internet connection and pull up your SharePoint documents.
Absolutely.
Right, Luke, we were talking about this earlier. If you're like traveling or you're all over the place or something like that, it's so important, the speed and that access.
Let's think of this scenario, Brendan, because I just want to say, because based upon the statistic of people, A, not knowing they can do it, or B, not actually using it, SharePoint is an actual app in your app store, whether you have an Apple or whether you have an Android. You download the app, and when you authenticate with your 365 account, it's one little app button, and everything pulls in automatically. The brilliant part about it is, and I think some of the scenarios where I've been working remotely, I've been in Mexico, and all of a sudden there's an urgent item and I need to update a budget just in case because I forgot before I left because I was already in vacation mode. I can pull up that Excel document on my phone, make a real-time change with Brendan on the phone with me while I have a mojito in my hand. It's brilliant. You can work from anywhere as long as you have an internet connection. And again, availability on the phone, fantastic idea. You're cutting the cords of the dependency of A, being in office, 2, needing your actual work laptop, and 3, if COVID taught us anything, we can work from anywhere. And SharePoint is the way to go because you can be anywhere in the world and hit your file server or documents within SharePoint.
Yeah, like the number of times I've been at my son's hockey game and somebody calls and is asking about something, and instead of me saying, okay, well, I'll let you know about that tomorrow. once I'm back at my desk or in my home office or that sort of stuff. I'm like, no, I just pull up the document, the Excel or the Word document or that sort of stuff, look up it and give somebody an answer right away. It's amazing how that speed can benefit. Or, you know, if you have a mojito in hand too, that sounds more fun than being in a cold hockey arena. But to each their own. All right, what do we have next? Ooh, SharePoint. I'm sorry, search. So we are talking about SharePoint. So one of that big kind of question that we started with, we spent 3.6 hours. So Luke, tell me how to get rid of the 3.6 hours that I spend looking for stuff.
Absolutely. Well, providing your SharePoint is organized, and we can get into that other component. There's a few different ways you can search within SharePoint. A lot of people go to a site, they search at the very top box, they type in a random word, let's just say policy, and any file that has policy attached to it gets returned. So you might have a list of 10, 20, 100,000, depending on how many documents you have living in there. That's your one generic type of search. Another type of search you can do is on a site search. So if you have subsites built in, like what we see here, sales and marketing, Techify team, you can actually search just within the site. So then you get a more refined search of what you're looking for. But one of the powerful components of SharePoint search is something called indexing. Indexing will actually take your Word, your PDF documents, your Excel documents, and actually index the full narrative that's within that document. So what that means is if you are looking for, let's say, quote unquote, a policy and procedure around travel for the company, and you know that narrative exists within the document, you can actually type that into the search and it will return the actual document for you as your top search result because you were that specific on what you were looking for. So indexing is a brilliant way to do searching, and it'll save so much time on your SharePoint site. And realistically, it's just a feature you turn on. Then there's one more feature which we will talk about, and that's searching through using Copilot to search as well. And we'll get onto that very soon.
Yeah, I use the general SharePoint search all the time. And it's amazing how fast it is to find documents, just like what we just showed in this demo. And it's like the example that I had was I was looking for a clause in a contract that was it was a limitation of liability clause, and it was specific to a contract from like 3 years ago that I had no idea where it was. And I literally just started typing limitation of liability, put in a couple other words, and it found the document for me. But yeah, as you said, you have to have the back end needs to be set up properly, indexed properly, and that sort of thing. The sort of next step to kind of supercharge your search capabilities, if you add Copilot. So we're going to do a Copilot webinar, as we talked about. Our next webinar is about how to use Copilot. But here's an example. If you had a Copilot license, you can essentially use Copilot as an assistant. And what it will do is it'll search through your Microsoft 365 data, through your SharePoint data, and it will find things for you. So if we go back to that, hey, I'm wasting 3.6 hours a day looking for stuff. Well, if I've got Copilot, I just type in what I'm looking for, and it's going to give me a link, and it's going to find it right away. And it's amazing the speed. Like you just saw it in real time. That's how long it takes to find a document. But in that case, you need to have an extra license, right? And you need to have that license deployed in your environment. Okay, so let's. What are we going to talk about next? I think we've got one more. Okay, now we're going on to supercharging things. So Luke, how can we take that sort of SharePoint? So SharePoint's a base, and we've got all our stuff in there, and we've got the capabilities. And like, what could we do to really supercharge this?
Well, if you want to, we'll call it as leveling up. If you have that SharePoint component built in with a Copilot license, a quick example we've got here is you can build a little bot into Teams. And we have some brilliant data and AI specialists in-house that can actually take a bot that you can interact with. It will read a specific area that it's programmed to in SharePoint to respond to your request. So as an example, policies and procedures, they all exist. They're many, many pages long. Not everyone knows every single component that's in there, but you want to find something. And let's just say I'm traveling and I want to know the meal allowance rate for the day when I'm traveling abroad. If you have the bot programmed into Teams that's reading the SharePoint site that has those documents for policy and procedures, I can ask it that simple question. Hey, how much is my meal allowance when traveling? And Copilot, combined with Teams, combined with SharePoint, will spit out that answer and say, yeah, you've got a $60 allowance a day. Brilliant. I didn't have to send an email. I didn't have to make a phone call. I didn't have to go digging to find the policy. And I didn't actually have to read through the policy. It's as smart as just as simple asking a question and bang, you get your answer. That's called leveling up. SharePoint, Copilot, and Teams all in one, all a part of the 365 package.
Awesome. All right. So that's some next level stuff. What we thought we would do is just go through a couple kind of regular questions that we have. I see we've got questions already coming in our Q&A panel. So please pop your questions, other stuff you want us to address. These are some of the most common questions that we get. So while we have Luke here, I'm gonna see if I can stump him. So, Luke, how much space do you have in SharePoint? This is what we get asked a lot, right? Like people have these big file servers and I've got all sorts of files and data and stuff like that. How much space do I get?
Absolutely. By default, Microsoft gives you 1 terabyte of storage. 1 terabyte, that's a significant amount of data for most companies. Now, the bonus part is that 1 terabyte of storage, for every 1 business premium license or better that you have, you get an additional 10 gigs per user account. So at very simple math, if you are an organization of 100 staff, you will have 2 terabytes of storage just because it extrapolates. And obviously sky's the limit depending on how many staff you have in there.
But if I want more than 2 terabytes of data, can I get more or am I just limited?
That's another good question. Absolutely. Microsoft offers the ability to purchase additional storage. The current cost is about 20 cents per gig. So if we did that kind of math, if you wanted an additional terabyte, it's going to run you about $200 a month. And obviously the cost over the entire year. But again, your data lives in SharePoint. It might seem like a deep overhead. However, the productivity outweighs the cost in our opinion, and we strongly recommend it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of businesses, there's always this conversation we have where they're like, oh, we have all this old data and we'd like to clean up and archive it and stuff like that. And we say, okay, so we can help you do that. You're going to need some internal resources to figure out what should be archived and what's live. And people will look at the amount of time and say, is it better for us just to pay that $200 a month for some extra storage as opposed to put all that time in cleanup? It's a business decision that's different for every business. Okay, so a bunch of people were concerned about the security. So let's talk about security a bit. So Luke, how do we make sure we secure all this data? Because it's up in the cloud, right? Anybody can access it if it's in the cloud?
No, not quite. So SharePoint is proprietary to your organization. And I'll go through this really quick and kind of keep it very contained. So one thing we recommend to everyone is conditional access. What does that mean? You ever tried logging in your bank and you've got a text message code sent to your phone to say, hey, is this really you? We offer conditional access. It's across our entire user base. We strongly recommend everyone to turn it on. Those policies protect. And what that means is when we boast the fact that you can access on any device, anywhere, well, conditional access policies ensures that the user logging in is actually you in authenticating. You actually have to hit a button on your phone or a text code to say, yeah, that's me. That's part 1. That's the biggest part. Security groups, number 2. It's very, very important that when we design any kind of SharePoint system, you're going to have sensitive data that shouldn't cross departments. Finance shouldn't be able to see HR. Public shouldn't be able to see HR, and so forth. So security groups are one of those dynamic permissionings to say if your department equals or if your job title equals, put them into this group. That group is attached to a specific place in SharePoint, and it's a WYSIWYG model. If anyone knows what WYSIWYG, that's what you see is what you get. Everything lives there, but unless you're attached to that security group, you're not going to be able to see nor access. So you're hardening your footprint by making sure that only the correct people can see what they want to see. External sharing. One of the biggest components is yes, I'm in SharePoint. I want to start sharing my content out to the external world. Now, by default, your internal SharePoint site is not allowed to be shared out. So those documents that live within your internal SharePoint site, we don't give access out to the outside world, because then you lose control of what sits within your SharePoint. It's the same idea as if I took a document and I emailed it out, you've lost control of that document. So the recommendation is everything stays in-house. And if you need an external place to share and collaborate with information, we just create another SharePoint site, a whole different set of permissions that allow the outside world, whoever you delegate, to come in and access your content or documents. And now you're collaborating not just internally, but you're collaborating securely externally with vendors, clients, business partners, whoever the case may be. And obviously within Techify, we boast about our standards. Standards. We follow Microsoft's guidelines and practices to the T. So anything that we do design and implement goes along Microsoft's best practice standards, including with some of the knowledge that sits up in these brains up here, to actually add an extra layer of security here and there to make sure the footprint is where it should be.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to come back in a minute to that best practices standards piece, because the SharePoint world is very much like reactive IT does not deal well with SharePoint, right? You can't just kind of do it as a project and then forget about it and then deal with tickets and support requests as they come in, right? Somebody's got to be auditing it against those best practices standards and looking at what the security and the security groups and what's happening on an ongoing basis. And if your provider, if your IT partner, your IT department's not doing that right now, it's a problem. It's a big vulnerability, right? So we had one of the questions I saw that came in was about external links, and so maybe we'll just do this one based on the question that's in the Q&A panel. Can we share a document with a large group of potentially 100 plus external contacts through SharePoint? And we'd also want to do it in a way that if anyone outside of those 100 got the link to the doc, they wouldn't be able to access it.
So the answer is yes, you can do that. So as of kind of what we see on screen right here, there's different control sets that can be applied to specific SharePoint sites and right down to the document level. So if you want to send to 100 contacts, the most secure way to do it would be to itemize and grab essentially a list of emails. So that way, those accounts are attached specifically to that SharePoint space. You can also do something else, which is called inviting a user into your tenant as a guest. That is the best and most secure way to control access to spaces. Takes a little bit to set up, but now you know you have that hardened footprint. You can also set it so that if someone forwards that link, they're not a guest in the tenant. They don't have an identity. They don't have access. Therefore, it does not qualify. So that is the best and most secure way to share content with multiple people outside of the organization while maintaining security.
Well, if you put in everybody's email addresses and then they need to put in that email to authenticate, and they'll send a code to their email. So they can only access it if they have access to that email. And then there's some other interesting things you could do. Like you can decide whether people can edit or download the file, where they can only view it on a web browser, right? Like that's a big deal. Can I download that file to my computer or not? You can put an expiration, as you see in the screen capture that we've got here. You can put an expiration date where you can say you can only look at this for the next week, and then it's gone, right? Even set a password.
The granularity of control and access for external is limitless. We can restrict printing. You can restrict downloading, what Brendan said, sharing. There's a whole different subset of controls. So it really comes down to the lens of what the business decision is for sharing this external content. Sky's the limit on control.
Okay. And maybe we should do, we'll do one more. What do we do to make our SharePoint AI ready? So the one or more people that are on this webinar that are excited about Copilot, we need to make SharePoint AI ready. What do we need to do, Luke?
Well, if you are A, not using SharePoint, let's get you in there. And two, if you are using SharePoint, the key piece about Copilot is it's an AI system that is data driven. So depending on where, and I'll use you as an example, Brendan, I'll pick on you. Let's just say you have access into every space in SharePoint. Well, maybe as a CEO, you shouldn't see HR files for any given reason, but you have access. If you were to ask Copilot a question, and you have access to that space through SharePoint, it's going to return the data. So the biggest and most important things we can do is security groups and the structure. You should only have access to what you should within SharePoint, because any data returned, Copilot's going to see it and can return it back, and you don't want HR files going out to someone that shouldn't. The indexing, as we mentioned before, indexing is a feature that should be turned on, because then it gives you more granularity and more specificity to the results that are being returned. Last but not least, SharePoint, fixing the issues. As Brendan mentioned, it is not a thing that we turn on, set and forget. It's something that should be regularly monitored, maintained, changed where needed. It's essentially the engine of your business, and that's not something that we don't take care of. You got to change the oil in your car all the time. Got to put gas in the car, so it requires regular maintenance to make sure.
Yeah, and that's a good sort of a segue to kind of our conclusion here, and then we're gonna get. I see we got at least 7 questions in the Q&A panel, so we're gonna fire through, or 7 more questions. We'll fire through each of them. If anybody else has questions, let us know. So here's the issue with a SharePoint implementation and conventional IT. So conventional IT, when there's an issue, it disrupts work. A solution, come up with a solution. And then that same issue just keeps happening across an organization or across a sector, or that sort of thing, because it's very reactive. Like too much of IT is just about fixing problems, and then problems get fixed and somebody moves on. And that's why people get frustrated with IT companies and IT departments, because they're inherently reactive. So here's the way we break that process. Or we break that cycle. When there's an issue, it disrupts work, and we figure out a solution, we create a best practices standard. So when it comes to SharePoint, we got tons and tons of these best practices standards about, okay, how do I keep it secure? How do I access it properly from a mobile phone? How do I make sure that Jimmy doesn't have access to salary data for Sally? How do I make sure that it's AI ready? How do I make sure that we're not sharing data externally with people that shouldn't be shared? All those sort of things are best practices. And so if you have best practices, then you have sort of a set of things that you can analyze your SharePoint on. And if somebody is looking at that on an ongoing basis, then they're saying, okay, this is within standards, so we're good. This is outside of best practices standards. So now we need to align it. And so that process of aligning something to a best practice standard, that's where you can really move IT from being reactive. And I have a problem I have to fix. Hey, there was our key business data got shared with somebody externally. Now that's a reactive issue I have to deal with, versus if I'm proactively auditing and reviewing things against best practices standards, then I find when things are not aligned, and then I can assess the business impact of those misalignments, right? Maybe it's not a big impact if something's misaligned to certain standards. Other ones, if you don't have the proper security policies and all your staff can see all the executives' salary and benefits and bonuses and stuff like that, that's probably a high business impact, because there's going to be a big disruption. And that to us is how you create really good technology strategy, and you move from this reactive world of IT to a world where small businesses, nonprofit leaders, executives are getting a deeper, better type of IT advice than, hey, replace your computers every 4 years and that'll work and replace your server and stuff like that. So we operationalize that through a process that we call a program we call intelligent technology. For our clients that are on that call, they know about this. If you're not a client of our, the way that it works is we have a process and a dedicated team. It's called techification. And so once a month, our team are going on site to our client sites and looking at over 800 best practices. We usually on a month-to-month basis look at 100 to 150 things, including SharePoint best practices, and auditing them and seeing, okay, are we aligned to best practices? And then getting that client. We usually fix, improve, change 10 to 15 things on a monthly visit. So the idea here is you go month after month after month, and it's audit, review, align, audit, review, align. And that environment is becoming better functioning, more productive, more secure over time. And then the things that can't be just sort of changed on the spot by a technical person would go to a quarterly strategy planning process. The things that are big, company user affecting change or require budget, that goes to a technology strategy process. And those two things are the foundation of the service that we deliver. We do all the rest, the weekly maintenance, the ongoing backup alerts, the as needed kind of service desk, help desk type of stuff. We implement projects and that kind of thing. And but that techification process and that strategy process are the foundation for what we do. And it fuels everything. Like our projects are much more effective because we have those standards and we implement against those standards. And it's a foundation, but so many IT departments and IT companies have no standards. So they're fixing problems based on whatever they think whatever way they think it should be fixed. They're implementing projects based on whatever kind of their experience and that sort of stuff. And they're not using those standards. So if you're interested in learning more productivity, AI, how to use SharePoint better, please take your QR code, or you can go to ai.techify.ca and sign up for our productivity and AI assessment. And what we'll come in, we'll do a look at your infrastructure. We'll look at how ready you are for SharePoint, or what the state of your SharePoint might be, how ready you are for AI adoption. We'll go through a whole bunch of questions and give you a roadmap for where you should go, and give you a sense of what other folks in your industry are doing with SharePoint, with AI readiness, and that sort of thing. And we got oodles of other kind of resources and stuff like that. We came out with a publication earlier this year, top 10 tech priorities for 2024, the things that we see are the priorities everybody should be looking at. SharePoint happens to be one of them. And so if you go to the QR code there, you can download it, or there's also an article on Forbes this is my, I guess, plug for myself, that I posted on Forbes about why reactive IT is the enemy of AI adoption. So have a look. It sort of goes through, if you're interested in the AI front, dive into that a little bit more. And you can always just reach out to us the conventional way, right? Luke or I, happy to take emails and calls if you have questions. So speaking of questions, Luke, are you ready?
Absolutely.
We got some tough ones here.
Yeah, I'm just going to scroll the list. So let's see. Brian Harris, possible to index PDF files. Unfortunately, the naming convention of PDF will be indexed. The actual content through OCR will not. It's subject to Word, Excel, and the basics. Now, with that being said, though, there are third-party applications that can be installed in conjunction that are approved by Microsoft and SharePoint that can actually scan, OCR the document, and make those files indexable. So there's an extra layer to that one. Another question I'm seeing from Brian here, AutoCAD, DWG files. SharePoint natively will open up your regular documents through Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Now, DWG files, because they're AutoCAD proprietary, you would need a browser plugin that supports DWG files, because when you launch and open, everything is being done through the browser and not through the proprietary application. I'm not a CAD guy, but I believe there probably should be support from Autodesk somewhere to have a browser plugin to actually view the documents themselves.
Yeah, I think we've got a bunch of folks that are doing some CAD stuff with SharePoint. Let's go back up to the top of the list. So there's a question about how do you access SharePoint on your phone?
Yep, absolutely. On the phone. So if you have an Apple phone or an Android phone, go to your Play Store on Android or your App Store on Apple and look for the app called SharePoint. There's an actual app you can download for SharePoint. When you tap on that app to log in, it's going to look for your 365 account or your email address. So luke@techify.ca. And when you're logged in, you'll be logged in as Luke, as my business account or yourself. And on there, you should see the list of sites that you should have access to. If you don't see the list of sites, you can always plug in the URL and save it as a favorite. It's a proprietary app. So that way you can have, if you have access to one or more SharePoint sites, it's right there for you. Again, driven through the app, have to be downloaded through the Play Store or Apple Store.
Let me give you a bit of a plug, a couple other things that are relevant to this. Make sure you're using the Outlook app on your phone. A lot of people use native mail apps. There's all sorts of enhanced integration that they keep on putting into the Outlook app to be able to find, like you could be going in and looking, pulling up in your phone and, oh, I got this meeting coming up. And it will tell you related documents that are in your SharePoint for that meeting. The other apps that you can use, other ways that you can access your SharePoint data, if you have the Word app or the Excel app or the PowerPoint app, like right within those apps, you can go to open up your data that's in your SharePoint. And the important thing for this to remember is once people have the ability to access data, your SharePoint data on a phone, you need to make sure that these phones are properly secured, people. So having mobile device management policies in place, using Intune, stuff like Intune, to manage mobile devices, to be able to remotely wipe, make sure that the proper security settings are in place, that sort of thing. Super, super important. So it's not like the kind of Google have access to everything anytime, don't worry about security type of world. We want to make sure that we keep our stuff secure. Maybe I shouldn't have said that about Google. Anyway, let's just make sure everything's secure. So thanks, Sandy, for that question.
All right. And I see an interesting one here where it says some organizations that fully adopt SharePoint but do not use Teams, and kind of fully adopt Teams but rarely use SharePoint. What's the real differences? So I'll frame this in a very interesting fashion. OneDrive, well, SharePoint, consider this the windshield of the car. This is what you visually see, and this is what you're kind of seeing, your documents. OneDrive is the actual engine in the car where everything is being stored, and Teams is kind of the wheel, something you can control and interact with per se. When you create a new Teams team, you're actually inadvertently creating a SharePoint site powered and stored within OneDrive, which lives in the cloud. I know that sounds complicated. There is a lot of integration where if we built a SharePoint site, we could actually integrate that right into Teams itself. You know, when you click on your Teams, and at the top, if you've ever noticed the tabs, you can say, I want to hit the little plus button up there, and you can add an app. You can add a link to SharePoint, so you can have it built right into Teams. The nice thing about the 365 platform, everything is integratable. So it really depends on the style or business decision of how you want to work. You want to work exclusively through a web browser, just on the web through SharePoint, you can do that. You want to work exclusively through Teams, but powered by SharePoint in the back end and OneDrive, you can do that. It gets a little complicated to understand. So I hope that the wheel, the windshield, and the engine kind of model kind of helps frame up the differences there.
Can I just let me add, I'll augment what you said. So if you are using Teams but not SharePoint, or SharePoint but not Teams, your people are less productive. So Luke is giving you the nice answer. I'm going to give you the not very nice answer.
Okay.
So if the organization is not fully utilizing Teams and SharePoint, you are like, you're kind of half-assing it. And you're kind of going 1 foot in, but not 100% in. And so we believe here that you should go full double cheek. And there's an integration it's just super effective, right? Like you have people communicate. So if you have people who are communicating in Slack and then accessing documents that are in SharePoint. Sure, you might like Slack better, but you're missing on all sorts of capabilities to like quickly access documents, to be able to share them easier, to integrate it with meetings, to in the future integrate it with Copilot, and how you're taking meeting notes and integrate chat bots within. So if you're using SharePoint but not Teams, well, you can't have a chat bot that's going to access your documents really easily. Like I can give you like a million things. So just please trust me, it's crazy. Both, please, both. I have yet to see a good reason not to do both. And hopefully I haven't offended you by the passion I have for this particular topic.
Well, I appreciate the double cheek reference. So yeah, we're a 2 foot all in kind of organization when you adopt all that. And I appreciate the kind of, we'll say, good cop, bad cop placate that we had there. Moving on, I got another question, some more questions here. So the indexing feature, this has to be turned on by IT? If the SharePoint administrator, global administrator, or IT, yes, they should be turning the feature on. Now, it could be a default setting on the SharePoint library. If it's not activated, give your IT folks just a quick jingle, and it's a really quick switch and a button that can be activated on the SharePoint library for indexing to make your
It's
life.
also a standard.
It's our standard.
Standard.
I'm just saying.
Reactive. So reactive IT, you need to put in a ticket to turn this on. Proactive IT would be coming to you and saying, hey, we should really turn on indexing because it's going to improve the productivity of our staff because they're going to be able to find documents better. Just a good example. Hey, Luke, can I take the next one? It's
yeah, go for it.
All right. So next question, can you collaborate in PDF files? So I want to jump in because we do this all the time. We've got contracts that need to be signed. So we share PDFs. And so I can just go in, open the PDF, add my signature, and then it's there. And we don't have to email stuff back and forth. So you can definitely share PDFs just like you would share other types of documents.
Cool. The next one on me. So access to a document. So you don't have to be an admin. So when you look at a document, you see those 3 vertical dots. Hit those 3 vertical dots like you're right clicking, and at the bottom you should see details. And then what you'll get is a context menu that should open up on the right hand side. And then in that context menu, you should see who has access. And then you'll be able to see the little pictures of people and actually the names or email addresses, depending on how it's set up. You'll be able to see who has access to that document. Or if you want to do it at the folder level, you can do it at the folder level as well. But get yourself down to the details and you'll see the little context menu slide in to tell you who is what.
So Sarah has said they're the dream team. I think, I don't know if she's referring to us or Teams and SharePoint.
Well, I'm gonna go with a fist bump and say it's us. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll take that as good feedback from Sarah that we're the dream team. All right, one last question that we have. Why would you need to use SharePoint if files are already integrated within Teams? Can you just primarily use Teams?
You can. I'll say yes and no to this question. And I love questions like that because yes, if everything is just in Teams and you just want to see a glob of files hanging around, sure. Think of this though. SharePoint is more than just a file storage system. SharePoint can be what's called an internal intranet. One of the nice things that we have at our business here is we have many departments. We have many people that collaborate. We have a GUI, we'll call it a GUI interface. Think of an internet page, but internally, which is called your intranet. Those are all SharePoint pages. And if you have these cool pages that can display like Power BI reports and pull documents from over here or have some quick links, that's more than just a document management system. That's what SharePoint can also do for you if you want to level up, but also it has the integration into Teams just in a very simplified document format. So I'll throw that little tidbit out there in case any of your companies are using an intranet. And if you're not, well, guess who can hook you up with one?
That's awesome, and I think that's an important discussion. And like some folks, depending on job role, could just get away with just Teams, right? You could be, if you work on a project and all you do on the project is access the documents, but if you want to go, if you want to do some of the more advanced features you have, Sarah did, she clarified. She was talking about SharePoint and Teams, unfortunately, not about you and I, so we'll like a little
Okay.
kind of tier, but she said we're good too. Just not as good at SharePoint and Teams, which fine. That makes perfect sense. Okay, awesome. We've answered a boatload of questions, and we appreciate so many people staying on right to the end. Hopefully this was useful to you. Please provide feedback to us. Feedback drives our organization, allows us to continue to make better and better content, webinars, training sessions, all that sort of stuff. Luke, you did a fantastic job. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I appreciate, again, pleasure to digitally meet everyone, and I hope to see you on our future webinars, and you might see this face on future webinars if Brendan invites, but thank you so much for attending. It was,
Well, it'll all be based on the feedback we get, right? If people liked it, then we'll bring it. Hopefully I don't get thrown off the island either. All right, on that note, thank you very much for joining. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.